Stash Rubin with the Rubin team. Let's go take a look.
All right, we're back live with the Rubin team Wednesdays at 12. Today is February 7th, of course, and I'm joined by none other than San Francisco's finest, Allison Chapleau. What's going on out there, Allison?
You know, we're just getting the year started. I think everyone's itching to go. San Francisco in particular has had a rough couple of years. And so I think we are appreciating a different interest rate climate. And I think there's a lot of people that have been wanting to sell since the onset of COVID who paused and who didn't really know what to do. And so this is the first opportunity we've really seen since 2020 to say, okay, maybe now is the time. Let's get this done. So I think we're about to see some more inventory. We've had really low inventory, but we're getting the year started and a lot of questions about what's the market, what should I do, what's my timeline, interest rates, starting to roll. We're getting close to it, probably very similar to your market out there.
Yeah, I mean, they're both urban centers, right? And so from the commercial perspective, we're definitely starting to see some pickup on the commercial and investment side. There are some office buildings that are trading hands, some development sites that are trading hands that we really weren't seeing. And also on the leasing side as well, we're seeing an uptick in activity, even though companies are still sort of recalibrating their needs for space. But we're seeing a pickup as far as some big ticket retail sites, like along the Fifth Avenue and Madison Avenue corridor. So I think that's all a good sign for the city rebounding. Do you see that your market was it more interest rates, or was it more sort of fiscal policy issues and like domestic policy issues in San Francisco in particular? I know that you've had, some problems with homelessness, drug use. Obviously, it was in the news last year for assaults. So what are you seeing as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, I think San Francisco's been hit on multiple fronts. We were the golden child since the beginning of my career. So I started in 2002. And, we've always had tons of jobs, big community, and lots going on. This time around, the city and the health of the city has really been an issue. Mm-hmm. And the leaders of the city haven't responded as quickly as I think a lot of us would have wanted to. The drug issue is real. And I think that there's been a focus on homelessness, but I think that there's a lot of people in the camp of solving that, but keeping the drugs off the streets has been a real problem. And I've spent quite a bit of time in New York in the last couple of years, and I can tell you that we don't have the population or the volume of people to cover the issue. It's just wide out in the open. There's bodies on the streets. And it just doesn't feel safe. So some neighborhoods are thriving. The neighborhoods that you would imagine are thriving. Then there's parts of the city that are just a bit hopeless.
Right. And so what neighborhoods are thriving? Where are you seeing the most interest recently?
So District 5, which is central the city. So if you just go right in the city center, everything around there, the tenants really like it. Alamo Square, the Lower Haight, Nopa, the tenants want to live there. District 7, which is the Marina, Cow Hollow, Pacific Heights. District 1 is the Richmond. The northern part of the city, but out towards the west side, has really picked up a lot in the last couple of years. So people have spread out. People want to be in the city. But so we've got a drug issue. It's affecting us. It hasn't been fixed. I think there needs to be a focus on that. And when the focus really gets peeled on how to deal with that, I think the homelessness, there was a study, I don't want to quote the numbers, but I thought it was very, very important. It said that basically they offered homes to everyone some 60% or more turned down the homes. They wanted to be on the street. That tells me that, you've got a party on the street. So the party needs to be, the lights need to be turned off on that party. So every other shareholder and stakeholder in San Francisco can thrive. And the focus has been on keeping that party going, and that's not okay.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's you have these liberal policies that are essentially coming back to haunt these cities, right? You have San Francisco, you have it happening in Portland a little bit. And, the de Blasio administration came into New York a few years ago and basically stripped away all of these sort of positive policies that came into effect with Bloomberg and somewhat through Giuliani. And it's unfortunate, but it's true that you have, these mayors and governors. Here in New York, we had the state legislature pass a law a few years ago that it's a bail reform law, essentially. And so these people who should not be on the streets are free to continue doing what they would have otherwise been put in jail for years for. And it's just a sort of revolving door. I actually had the opportunity to sit down with some police last year. As some people know, I unfortunately had a car get stolen. And so that put me in touch with law enforcement in various municipalities. And I had the opportunity to sit down with a couple of these police who were handling my case, both in New Jersey and here in New York City. And they expressed some of their frustration because of these bail reform laws. And, things just need to be tightened up a little bit, frankly, because otherwise you have criminals roaming the streets. And that's why you see crime escalating, and it's really impacting urban centers and making people think twice before they, want to live in these great cities. So it's not to say that it's not safe. I want to make that perfectly clear. It is safe. You just have to be more mindful about what you're doing and where you're going. A friend of mine yesterday told me a story about his wife who got pickpocketed, where somebody brushed up against her on a subway stair, and she thought it was kind of odd. And she was listening to an audiobook, and her audiobook kept playing, but she just had a weird interaction with this guy who brushed up against her. So she instinctively followed him up the block as she got out of the subway, and he turned around and said, "What?" And then he went into his pocket, pulled out her phone that was displaying her audiobook that she was listening to, and she realized that he had her phone, and he just handed it back to her because he realized that he had been sort of, fingered as the guy who had stolen her phone. So it was one of these things where her instinct kicked in, and she didn't realize that her phone had been stolen until he handed it back to her. But anyway, So you're focused primarily on commercial, right?
Multifamily, mixed use, and commercial. So with a heavy emphasis on multifamily. And I think we can talk about the safety being an issue. I didn't feel unsafe in New York at any time. I stayed Midtown a few weeks ago. Right. Ton of energy, really enjoyed it. In parts of San Francisco, I don't feel safe. I turned down some listings last year, and my team is all ladies. And we were just like, God, we don't feel safe. Don't feel safe going in the building. I've had quite a few female sellers in the last couple of years. They're just like, I don't, we had some restrictions regarding evictions and some problems with, people doing things they shouldn't be doing in the building and couldn't get rid of them. So to say San Francisco is unsafe in parts of the city, it's a very true statement. There'll probably be a lot of people who don't like that statement, but I think it's true. I don't feel safe in all parts of San Francisco. And I've been here for long enough, just over 22, 23 years. It hasn't always been that way. Market Street doesn't have a ton of traffic. And, you guys got the traffic. So as that relates to apartment building values, you have a lot of people that love to live in San Francisco. Let's take that. They're just wanting to live in other neighborhoods. So you take this population that really likes to go to work, has good jobs, enjoys going to the community, likes living in the Bay Area. They want to live where other people want to live. They want it to be safe. They want to walk out the door, go to restaurants, have coffee, live their life, shop. And so they're pushed into other neighborhoods. And I think those neighborhoods are actually thriving. They feel very busy and full and happy and all those things, where the other neighborhoods are empty. Tying that back to real estate and investment, you've got a lot of units sitting vacant. Rents are pro forma for a variety of reasons, mostly for value, right? You got loans on those buildings, shareholders in those buildings, investors to account for. And so they needed to underwrite them at pre-pandemic levels. Well, pre-pandemic's far from there. So I do think if San Francisco lowers some of those rents, and I'm not talking like low, but like lowers them, we'll get really competitive. And the young people will be like, oh God, I can live in San Francisco for the first time in 5 years. It's affordable. Let's go. And you'll see an inflow of traffic. But the way the rents are now, not to date myself, but in 2002. So I just was out, I was brokering at Marcus and Millichap, just out of college. I rented my first studio for $1,250 in the marina. That same studio is $2,500 today.
Right. So rents have gone. You're talking about rents having gone up in the last 20 years or so by over 10x.
It's double.
Yeah. It's not 10x.
Let's take that
basically 100%.
Right. Yeah, let's take that same studio today. That was on Mallorca. So if anyone's listening and in San Francisco, they're gonna be like, yeah, that's it was a top floor, 301 in this building, had the view. I paid $1,250. It was great, right? Had a parking spot that I paid a little bit extra for. And I called the guy off his vacant for rent sign, just started in the business. I'm like, well, who are you going to call? Okay, I'm going to call every rent sign and talk to the owners, see if they, that's how you start the conversation. I was at Marcus Millichap, had to make my dials. And the guy's like, oh, I have a vacant unit. So I moved in there. So that same unit today is $2,600.
For a studio. That's remarkable.
Junior one, if you want to be generous.
That's a one bedroom. To hell with the junior. That's a one bedroom.
We're gonna pro forma that. If I'm the broker, that's $29.95. We're gonna call that a junior. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because Eric Adams, the New York City mayor, recently came out a couple months ago saying, who are we as a government to decide what people call a bedroom? And because in New York City you have all sorts of spaces that people call bedrooms, right? There's a home office, there's a closet. I mean, if it's big enough to put a bed, let's let the individual decide what they want to call a bedroom, right? It's one thing if it's like deeply illegal and it's one of these basement apartments that you hear about in Queens or something, but it's New York City. And so especially in today's day and age where people are talking about converting office buildings and you have sort of a bigger floor plate. And so you're going to have more internal space than you are space that's able to access or have use of windows. You are going to have more interior bedrooms. And so one of the things that Eric Adams has done is he's come out in this position of saying, hey, let the people decide. And so we have a lot of spaces here that we call 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, where they're not legal bedrooms, meaning they don't have windows. They may or may not have a closet, but we call them bedrooms. And StreetEasy is the listings aggregator here in the city that a lot of people use. And so they were here before Zillow. Zillow obviously built itself into the publicly traded company that it is today. Some years ago, the founders of StreetEasy struck a deal with Zillow, so they sold to Zillow. So it's a subsidiary. But what's interesting is that StreetEasy, if we put these spaces on StreetEasy, like as a 3-bedroom, and it's really a legal 1-bedroom, they'll arbitrarily, or I shouldn't say arbitrarily, they'll unilaterally change the space from a 3-bedroom to a 1-bedroom, which is irritating because it's irritating to me as a broker because you automatically get less eyes on the listing, less traffic to the listing, takes longer to sell and sells for less, but they're really doing the consumers a disservice because if you're searching for a 3-bedroom in this amazing space that is effectively a 3-bedroom, doesn't come up in your search, then you as a buyer are going to miss it. And then the seller ultimately is harmed the most because it's going to sell for less because it's going to spend more time on the market. And Street Easy is effectively acting as a billboard, right? It's like, you remember back in the day when you used to go to the grocery store and you were looking for somebody to mow your lawn or somebody to babysit, or if you had a car to sell, or if you were babysitting, you could say, hey, I'm a babysitter, I'm available. Here's how I'm going to spread the word by putting it on the billboard in the grocery store. Well, in today's day and age, Craigslist, Zillow, Street Easy, those are the billboards of today. And they're also the billboards of real estate. And so there is actually a law that I found out about a couple of years ago that protects these websites by being the messenger. In other words, they are not responsible for the data that is posted on their website from a legal perspective. Now, if Street Easy wants to come out and say, hey, I don't want you posting that on my website because I think it's unethical, well, they're essentially playing God, and they are impacting the outcome for the consumer. So, I strongly disagree with that. And, it's one of those things that are sort of frustrating to my clients and I. I don't know that you run into that so much in San Francisco because you're obviously marketing slightly different spaces, but that's just been an experience.
I mean, I do think that there needs to be some sort of communication between these big companies, and there needs to be a process around Zillow, square footage, room counts, etc. I mean, if you submit an actual floor plan stamped and you submit it, there should be an override, even if it takes a week or 2 weeks. There should be a program that you can say, hey, how you had it isn't correct, and this is what it is, and let me show you. And then they'd have more accurate information. I think the goal for everyone is accuracy and transparency to benefit the broker, the seller, the buyer, and everyone involved. There needs to be a process.
I don't think it needs to benefit the broker.
Meaning disclosure, meaning I'm marketing a 1, I'm marketing a 3, I'm marketing a 2. I just want to, it's whatever information I provide, I want it to be correct. If I'm providing it like you, saying this is a 3-bedroom or could be used, but then this is saying it's a 1, that's a problem. Then people lack trust in my information. I just want it to be what it is.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, but yeah. I'm in favor of marketing it as it's used and how one could use it. That's all.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, and so so you went straight from school into Marcus and Millichap, so you really didn't get a taste of the residential world so much.
No, so in community college, I barely made it through high school. And I did make it through high school, but in the process, gal came to sell my mom's house, and I was in junior college, and she's like, well, my daughter, I think, is going to be good at real estate. And she's like, okay. So she hired me to tour, set up her tour. So this was pre-internet. This was pre-Google Maps, set up all the tours and, tour people around and show them houses. So I did that for 6 to 9 months. And in that process, I learned that, while I like residential, it was going to be a pretty hard market is what I thought to break into young. So then I ended up going to college, which I actually really thrived in. It was a different environment. Studied business and finance and got into that and really started to understand that real estate had the ability to change my life completely from a wealth perspective, from a freedom perspective, and just gravitated towards buildings and how you could buy a building at that time. Let's say it was $800,000 and you could put a tenant in there. And all I had to do was come up with the 20 or 25%. The tenant was going to pay off the income. Assuming zero appreciation, I was going to go from having $17 in the bank account to $1 million. And that seemed like a lot of money as a 21-year-old. And I was like, I'm done. I'm sold. How do I get into commercial real estate? And so I worked briefly for 6 months for a great guy at UBS in the financial sector. It didn't really appeal to me. I didn't really have a passion for it. So then I started as an assistant for a year and a half. The program that Marcus had was this at this time you did for a year and a half. And it was a great program.
So I'm sorry. So you were working at UBS in what capacity?
I was working for a senior. At that time, I think he was his senior VP. I was like his runner, his assistant, his admin.
Got it. Yeah, so you were essentially you were his right hand in finance at UBS, but it wasn't. So you weren't yet in real estate, right?
Yeah, and so that was in my last year of college. My degree was in finance, and I had a strong interest in math. But like he would say things to me, and I just didn't really understand them, and I didn't. But when we talked about real estate, I just was like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Like it just got to me. My grandmother was a real estate agent. I took the job and I never looked back. I think real estate is absolutely the best job on earth for me and for a whole group of people. I think whether you sell residential, you sell commercial, you sell triple nets, whatever you sell, real estate is an amazing venue. And there's so many jobs within real estate. There's title, escrow, attorney. I mean, we're using real estate almost 100% of the time. We're consuming real estate 100% of the time, whether we're driving our car, or we're at work, we're at home. I like residential real estate. I just really gravitated towards the ability to change my future through buying and owning commercial real estate, and having no money brokering was the way to get there.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's a natural bridge toward actually building your own portfolio. And along the way, of course, we see opportunities that are too good to pass up. And so we, take advantage of them. I had a deal a couple of years ago that was falling through. For the first time in my nearly 30 years, I had a buyer get turned down for financing. And I said, well, this is a sign if there ever was one. And it was a great post-COVID deal. So I swooped in. I bought the thing, and it was like a fix and flip kind of situation. So we're in the process of selling it and going into a 1031. And I actually met with somebody yesterday who bought a small apartment. He had the opportunity to buy his neighbor's apartment. He renovated it, and then in COVID, he decided that he was going to moved to his house in Connecticut, so he wound up renting it out. It's now been rented out for 3 or 4 years, so it no longer qualifies as a primary residence. So now I was telling him about the 1031 strategy, and he could really continue to build a nest egg for himself because he doesn't actually need the proceeds from the sale because he already owns his house in Connecticut. So it really opens up a wide world, I should say, of opportunity for people who use it to their advantage. Have you seen any investors or people coming to you thinking about opportunity zone investing?
Yeah, there's been some conversation about it. Most of my business is in San Francisco, which is not opportunity zone. But I have a couple clients who've gotten into it, and you have to be able to analyze another market real quickly. There's a ton of benefits, that I don't understand fully. Yeah. But they sound exciting. And I think that people do really well. But there are opportunity zones because there's risk associated with them. Mm-hmm.
I think it just depends on where you go, right? Some markets are riskier than others. But what's great about them is they're really in every state.
They're all over the place.
Yeah, and I think you just have to be familiar with the nuances of those markets. And sometimes when you tie into local experts, they can say, "Oh, here's an area that's definitely on the rise," or "Here's another area that, San Francisco, like these different zones in San Francisco. That is your bread and butter. You are clearly a subject matter expert. So the trick is really to find the Allison and the Josh of those respective markets.
Correct.
Rather than just relying on your own research.
I own apartments outside of California, and I definitely rely on the experts, but learning how to analyze a market's a really important skill set. I also think getting sharp in another market helps my ability to underwrite San Francisco in a much clearer way because I can see how people are doing it. To me, you always have a leader in a market. Like, why are rents pushing? Who are rents? And I think nothing is more important, and love your feedback on this one, is who are my tenants? How are they paying the rent? That's all I want to know. And once I can figure that out, then I think everything else is just another metric of who's going to, when I look at a building, the first thing I think is, okay, who's my buyer? The second thing I think is, who's my tenant? And then I work backwards on value. And I think a lot of time it's like, well, if it's a one buyer, we're going to be out there maybe for a while, maybe not. There's always a buyer. It's just how we're going to get that person in that price. And I think as we start to see buildings get filled up here and that landlords make some concessions in different neighborhoods, you're going to see a more robust market. San Francisco is a great place to live, like New York, and people want to live here.
Yeah. So you mentioned the apartments that you own outside of California. How did you discover those opportunities and isolate those markets?
Yeah, so I ride horses. I show jump competitively, and my husband does it professionally. And so in the summer, we travel around to different horse shows throughout the country. And, you know, naturally being a real estate person, you're sitting in the cafe and you're like, what's for sale? You know, you go on LoopNet, go on CoStar, and you see, and I was like, God, these deals look amazing. How can this be? I'm forecasts. And so then you sit there for the first few months and you're like, this can't be. And then you go back and you're like, okay, maybe it can be. And then you start talking to people. And I think if you're in real estate, you're in real estate. Yeah. And so it's a bit of that. I also am a big believer in hub off something when it comes to your real estate. So what I mean by that is, if you're buying a building, what is generating that tenant? You know, do you have a university? Do you have a college? What do you have that's going to keep those tenants regardless of a market? And I think a lot of markets, even if there's a downturn, has, like if you take USF, University of San Francisco, regardless of a market, conditions, interest rates, well, there's always going to be ups and downs. You're going to have tenants, you're going to stay full. That's really important. So I want to know, outside of jobs, who is going to rent? And is there another leader? You know, it's like needing multiple ways to earn business in real estate. I want multiple tenant sources. I don't want just one. I don't want it just to be jobs. I don't want it just to be San Francisco. So I don't know where I was going with that, but
so what's your favorite market if you had to pick a market outside of California?
Outside of California, well, I really like Lexington and Georgetown, Kentucky. That is definitely one of my favorites. You've got U of K. You've got great equestrian. You got horse community. You've got really great people. You've got the hospital there. You've got Toyota, which just announced another $1 billion plus. So you've got multiple sources of jobs, and you've got low price points. So you've still got a lot of people wanting to buy houses, because I don't know what the average house price there is, but relative to income, it seems pretty healthy. And you've got great metrics. A lot of California I like. So outside of San Francisco, though, I think Northern California is great. Like parts of Sonoma, Santa Rosa, Marin, Sonoma County. I think the Bay Area in general is a pretty healthy place. It doesn't just have to be San Francisco. Yeah,
no, definitely. And when you get up into Sonoma, I know plenty of people in that area. And one of them in particular moved from Ohio. The creator of Dot Loop moved out to, I think it's Sonoma, and loves it. He's out there with his family. And so he then sold Dot Loop and created Picasa, which is fractional ownership for vacation homes. So if you want to buy an eighth of a home in Aspen, Picasa is a great idea. Austin, if you're listening, that's a plug for you. And of course, back to Lexington, my friend Jay Pitts is a great team leader in Lexington. He's been trying to convince me to buy investment property there, and
it's brilliant.
Lexington's
a great market.
Compared to the market when he was initially suggesting it probably 7 years ago, it's really taken off. But I think it still has plenty of upside.
Plenty of upside there.
The median home price in Lexington, Kentucky, as of a few months ago, by the way, was about $345,000. So your dollar certainly goes a lot further there than in the Bay Area or here in New York City, where I got a referral yesterday from a colleague of mine down in Philadelphia on Tom Toole's team. And they said, oh, my friend wants to spend $500,000 and live in Brooklyn. And I said, all right, that's possible. We could find, the studio or one bedroom and, one of the nicer neighborhoods for $500,000 in Brooklyn. I was going to have somebody on the team work it. And we got on the phone with them, and it turns out they wanted a single family house for $500,000. So that might be a little challenging, maybe in the nether reaches of Queens, but certainly Long Island and, Hempstead or something maybe, but not a market that we serve. But so what have been some challenges over your career? I mean, sort of even pre-COVID, when you first started out, did you ever have any moments where you're like, I'm not sure that I'm going to make it?
Yeah, I had a lot of those moments. They came all the time. So I think that I just ignored my feelings and had complete certainty that it was going to work out. There was no way it wasn't going to work out. And that somebody said to me that the time to go out of something is when you're at the top of it, not when you're at the bottom of it. And I believe that if you go hard, I'd rather fail quickly, like rip the Band-Aid, than failing slowly. I see people, as sure you do, 20 years in the business. I was talking to this guy we really respect in the business, and we were talking about who'd gotten into the business and who's made it to the top 10 in San Francisco. The last broker to enter the market in San Francisco, it's made it to the top 10, was 2017. So the question was like, well, how do you make it? And I think you make it by just doing it. And I just kept doing it. And I had severe panic attacks sitting at Marcus. I'm not a dialer. I'm good on the phone. No problem. I'll pick up the phone and call whoever you want me to call. But that's not what I want to be doing. So I had to come up with other ways to get business. And that has been spectacular for me because I got in front of a market that kept evolving. I was like so happy when the internet came around and there was email streams and marketing and digital. I think we're so lucky to have social media. You can put it out there in 30 seconds that you want to sell a home. That doesn't mean you're going to sell a home, but you have a way to communicate to people. 20 years ago, you didn't. You had a phone and a desk, and that was how you let people know what you're doing. But I do think it was really the numbers. I had a goal, which was I wanted to do one BOV per week, which is a broker opinion of value. I think you guys call it the same thing. And whatever it was going to take to get that one, I just did that for long enough. And then the goal was 2 a week and just do that. And now I don't know, some days I do at least one a day, but it's much different. I'm not doing, I have a team who helps me put them together. And I think it's just a little bit every day for a long period of time will reduce, make results. It just is. And I think people, if you honestly ask them that didn't survive or just aren't thriving, what is it? Are they doing the work?
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of Story in Fanatical Prospecting, which is a fantastic book for anyone in sales.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, one of the sales managers reps hit a rough patch where like nothing was going right. And he said, I'll bet you that we could reverse engineer your problem and go back, 3, 4, 5 months and realize that you weren't making your calls. And so at the end of the day, I read another book called 4 Disciplines of Execution, which is a phenomenal, but hands down, one of the best business books I've ever read.
Okay. What is that? 4? Repeat that one more time.
It's called 4 Disciplines of Execution.
Okay.
Okay. And it basically just boils down business to its most basic essence. And so, anything that's trackable, anything that's measurable, and at the end of the day, it's all about doing the work, right? And tracking the work at the same time, because if you're doing anything, then it's worth tracking. So anytime that I'm making calls, I have a piece of paper and a pen in front of me, and I just do little, hash marks, right? So one stroke, and you'll realize that for every 10 calls you make, you're going to have one conversation. For every 10 conversations you have, you'll have one meeting. And then obviously the more experience you have, the more likely it is that, these meetings are going to result in transactions of some sort. It's not going to be an overnight thing. You're not going to go out and meet somebody and then do a transaction. But for me, my conversion rate from meetings to transactions is probably about 70%. But they're all different shapes and sizes. People say, oh, I see that you're doing a lot of high-end stuff, so you probably don't want to mess around with me at the $500,000 level. Nothing could be further from the truth. I love a good $500,000 deal because I know from my own experience that I would have never done the $20 million deals if I didn't do the $500,000 deals. A lot of these,
100%.
So a lot of these bigger ticket transactions started with these small relationships. That studio that you rented 20 years ago for $1,200. Well, I rented a $1,200 studio 30 years ago, and that guy went on to do $75 million worth of transactions. So I didn't know it at the time, but I treated him like I would want to be treated myself. I did the right thing by him. I stayed in touch. The next thing you know, there he is, more successful than any of us had even imagined coming out of school, renting that first apartment. So you just have to do the work, like you said, right?
I think just commit to it. And I think I'm always evolving, right? Like what I'm doing this year is different than last year. What I did last year is different. And I really set the goal. Also, I believe that brokerage is like seasons, right? It's not just all ups. You got winter, you've got spring, you've got summer. And sometimes in winter, it looks right now like maybe it's not so like prosperous, but oh yeah, it's, it's doing its thing. And there will be spring and there will be summer. And some years are going to be bigger than others. So I think it's just doing the work and doing the right work and doing it consistently. I just don't think you can fail. I do, a mentor told me though, and I think this is really valuable, is when you think of somebody, you have this all the time, just reach out right away. Stop what you're doing and reach out. And that one thing been amazing because people say oh, Allison, I can't believe you're calling me right now. Or I was looking for your number, or I'm considering selling my building. I think the universe works in amazing ways and we're all connected.
You better believe it in more ways than you can possibly imagine.
Right. And so I love that. And so doing business for me is how I connect to the universe. And I feel like there will be a point where perhaps I don't need to work or want, there'll be some in the traditional sense. But I really like it. I started listening to this other New York broker. He's been at it forever. The way he does it would give me a panic attack, but he loves it regardless of the business. And I think there's so much to that. The way we get business. So my strengths in listing, I work with sellers and when I go to a listing appointment, I really like it and I get in front of people. So for me, my most valuable time is being at a listing appointment and doing opinion of values and following up 10 years ago with people who I did a value with. And I think that's really important is know your strength. And if you're not good at listing appointments, it's who do you take with you? Find somebody who's good at that other thing.
Right. No, I've had experience many times where, I go out to meet prospective sellers who call me for my postcards. They don't know me from Adam. I don't know them. And, I go solo and I feel like I'm a little flat. And I hearken back to Sheryl Sandberg's book, what's it called? Lean In, if I remember. And so people want to feel that you're engaged with them and that you're on the same page as they are. And so oftentimes you need to sort of lean into the conversation and understand their complexion and, sort of what they're up to and where they're coming from. And sometimes, to be honest with you, I'm not there. I'm there physically, but I'm not leaning into the conversation. And so I have to be cognizant of when I go through these sort of, it's like a tidal shift in my mood or personality. And then on the next couple of meetings, I'll loop somebody in from the team who has like a, warmer personality and maybe more engaging, and I'll bring them with me. So I wouldn't be afraid to do that because, there's strength in numbers, obviously, to an extent. In commercial, these teams get pretty big and, there's 4, 5, 6 agents trying to, accomplish the objective. So you don't necessarily want to bring, 4 or 5 people with you. But if you bring one person, then the prospect will see that you care, as long as the person that you're bringing has the right set of experience and right personality for the job. I've had situations too where you bring the person who doesn't have the experience, and it kind of weighs you down a little bit. But
right energy
Allison,
is so important. I couldn't agree more. I do bring people, and oftentimes it's very rare you'll see my name alone on a listing.
Yeah.
I bring a lot of juniors, and that's on purpose. I would have loved some help from some seniors, and I think doing things together is it's a bigger pie. There's like unlimited opportunity out there.
Yeah. So if somebody were thinking about getting into the business today, what's the best piece of advice that you could give them?
I would say, if I'm just narrowing it down to one, pick somebody in your market to work with or work close to for 6 months to 12 months and see how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
I would get on a team. I think it's very different than it was 20 years ago where I was solo agent. I think it's all about teams. I think it's about resources. I think it's about exactly what we're talking about, the energy of when you go out there. I think being alone, it's a hard business for that. I would say pick a team, get going, get really clear, pick 500 contacts, know those contacts, keep following up, be helpful, and don't try to close a sale in the first year.
Yeah. So that's what I always tell people. You have to have a certain amount of money or the resources in order to just eat for the first 6 to 12 months, because you may not make a single dollar in that time frame. But if you keep your head down, stay consistent, make your calls, go preview property, be familiar with the inventory, be able to speak about the market dynamics, stay up to date on current events and different trends within the industry, you come out on the other side of the year and you're going to have a very solid foundation of knowledge that is impossible to replicate, and you just continue to build on that. And as people hear me speak now, they realize that I do have the right set of experience and knowledge, and that it didn't come from a formal education. It came from just spending time focusing on nothing but New York City real estate. So it's really as simple as that. So Allison, thanks so much for joining us today on the Rubin Special. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed learning about you, your market, and how you came to be so successful. So thanks so much for joining us, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
You bet.
Hi, it's Josh Rubin with the Rubin team.